3,935 recoveries. In Africa, confirmed cases are 54,654, with 2,078 deaths and 18,971 recoveries. In Nigeria, confirmed cases are 3,526, with 107 deaths and 601 recoveries. We give you latest stories at the moment. The United States of America has prevented a vote in the United Nations Security Council on the resolution on the coronavirus pandemic, apparently because it made implicit mention of the World Health Organization, diplomats said. The text under negotiation since March called for a worldwide cessation of hostilities in conflict zones so governments can address the pandemic. The European Union executive backed keeping curbs on travel to the continent in place for another 30 days until mid-June as part of extraordinary measures to limit the spread of coronavirus despite harming trade and tourism. The bloc decided in mid-March to close its external borders for any non-essential travel in a largely failed bid to prevent the 27 member states from closing frontiers inside Europe's control-free travel zone. The EU's Home Affairs Commissioner, Ylva Johansson, said this week Europe would have to go back to the future of open borders once the pandemic is under control. The U.S. economy lost a staggering 20.5 million jobs in April, the steepest plunge in payrolls since the Great Depression, and the starkest sign yet of how the novel coronavirus pandemic is battering the world's biggest economy. In Brazil, the biggest threat to the country's ability to successfully combat the spread of the coronavirus and tackle the unfolding public health crisis in the country's president, Jair Bolsonaro. The British medical journal The Lancet has said. In an editorial, The Lancet said Bolsonaro's disregard for and flouting of lockdown measures is sowing confusion across Brazil, which is now recording record numbers of COVID-19 cases and deaths and is fast emerging as one of the world's coronavirus hotspots. In Nigeria, civil society organizations have issued a statement on the oil and gas sector. They are seeking a reform of the downstream subsector of the oil and gas industry. Following recent outbreak of the novel coronavirus pandemic and the resultant twin shocks on the global economy and the impacts on crude oil prices at the international market, a virtual meeting was held on April 22, 2020 to enable the civil society groups appraise the effects of the recent events and implications on the Nigerian petroleum industry. After exhaustive deliberations on the evolving issues in the sector, the CSOs made the following observation, suggestions, and recommendations. First, the outbreak of the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19 pandemic, and the resultant global economic downturn has led to low crude oil prices, putting Nigeria under immense fiscal pressure. To reduce the pressure, they noted the few policy measures by the government to optimize available revenues, including the review of the federal government 2020 budget benchmarks and cut of the overall approved Appropriation Act by 1.5 trillion naira and the proposal to remove subsidy. They equally noted that the disclosure by the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources that the decision of the federal government to adopt a modulation mechanism to regulate petroleum products prices dictated and moderated by the interplay of market forces. They commended the step taken to reduce the pump price of premium motor spirit, also known as petrol, from 145 naira per litre to 125 naira per litre as a positive step in the right direction. They noted further that since the announcement by the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency, PPPRA, has released the price band for petrol put at between 125 naira upper limit and 123 naira 50 kobo at lower limit, effective April 1, 2020. They also noted the subsequent pronouncement by the Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, Malam Mele Kolokiari, that subsidy payment by the government on petroleum products has been removed with immediate effect from the pricing template by the PPPRA, in essence, the end to fuel subsidy in the country. While they noted that these difficult policy decisions align completely with the aspirations and advocacy for reform of the downstream sector of the petroleum industry, they commended the federal government for the courage to tread this path at this time in the national history. They also drew the attention of the government to the important point that more still needs to be done to effectively lead the industry on the path of sustainable regulations based on globally accepted standards and practices. Consequently, they believe there are yet more issues that would require the urgent clarification by the government to bring every stakeholder on the same page and ensure all Nigerians are carried along on these important issues. Here are some of the resolutions and recommendations from the CSOs. Having exhaustively deliberated on all the issues of concern tabled at their meeting, the undersigned participants therefore wish to make the following recommendations to the administration of the President, Muhammadu Buhari. First, as a matter of urgent national importance, they strongly support the call for the privatization of the country's 4 refineries in their present condition to avoid further revenue losses. They suggest the adoption of a transparent merits-based model for privatization, either considering the Nigerian liquefied natural gas for part privatization or an outright sale. They encourage the government to adopt favorable fiscal terms that bring about a renewed investors' confidence and also help fast-track the proposed 29+ refineries which still have valid operating license. Second, they enjoin the Presidency and the Minister of State Petroleum Resources, Department of Petroleum Resources, and the PPPRA to publicly support the declarations made by the Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation on the removal of fuel subsidy through an official public statement on April 8, 2020, which was signed by the GMD in various media appearances in recent times. Third, they entreated the government to lay out defined processes and regulatory guidelines to support the announced removal of fuel subsidy. This should be published forward and announced by the Presidency and the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources to give the policy an official seal of affirmation to all Nigerians that are not in another false expedition. Fourthly, they called for the federal government to commit to the sustainability of no subsidy regime by entreating it in law, either through a standalone legislation or through appropriate clauses integrated into the Petroleum Industry Bill, which will allow for the sustainability of the no subsidy regime. Fifth, they required the government to clarify the role of the Petroleum Support Fund, PSF, in the new no subsidy regime. Clarity, according to them, is required about how that fund is being managed, whether the over-recovery sums were deposited there, and how they are expected to be spent. Sixth, they encouraged the government to transition the PPPRA and the PEF into new roles to ensure the sustainability of the proposed non-subsidy policy, repeal of the PPRA and the PEF-MB Act, and transition them into efficient and competent institutions to support the reforms encapsulated in the proposed Petroleum Industry Bill, which are possible options to consider. Seventh, they urged the government to prepare for a post-price regulation era by prioritizing consumer protection to ensure that when the downstream sector of the petroleum industry is liberalized, the interest of the people will not suffer exploitation in the hands of profiteering marketers. They suggested an antitrust or competition propositions using the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Act 2019. They encouraged the government to consider providing varied options for Nigerians in terms of transportation systems in the country when inevitably increases in the price of crude oil increases results in the rise of the price of refined petroleum products. Ninth, they suggested that the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation as a national oil company should not be given any advantage, whether comparative or competitive, over other petroleum products marketers in terms of access to foreign exchange to handle their importation of products activities to create a level playing field for all players. If the NNPC must remain a player in the market, it must strive to operate under the same conditions and rules as other players in the sector, regulated only by the prevailing market forces and competition. Tenth, while they awaited the conclusion of the work on the Petroleum Industry Bill, they urged the government to take steps to delineate the roles of policy formulation, regulation and enforcement, as well as operation in the industry. The suggested policy directions should be left under the purview of the Minister of Petroleum Resources, with the President and Minister of State Petroleum Resources leading their support to declarations by the Group Managing Director of the NNPC to give weight and establish trust between the government and the people. This position was signed by the following civil society groups: the Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC, Budget, Spaces for Change, Youth Forum for Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, Center for the Study of Economies of Africa, Nigeria Natural Resources Charter, Media Initiative for Transparency in Extractive Industries, Order Paper Advocacy Initiative, Women in Extractives, Connected Development, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, Center for Transparency Advocacy, Koyenum Imala Foundation, Africa Center for Leadership Strategy and Development. And that'll be all for tonight's COVID-19 updates discuss. You can visit our website www.prosheng.com to get more updates from our stories read out today and videos and analysis. In this period, ProShare, Nigeria's leading financial information hub, has packaged for you a platform called the Corona Central Watch, where you can get credible and reliable market data and analysis, and also the trackers from the national, state, even to the global level of coronavirus and how it's impacting the globe. You can also follow our social media platforms showing on the screen for further updates on our market reports. Till we come your way again, thank you for watching. Have a nice day and stay safe.